Hello and welcome to a Halloween edition of Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Sarah.
And I'm Ben.
Thank you so much for listening to us on this Halloween week of 2025. How are you doing, Ben?
Oh, I'm always excited and happy around Halloween. It's always been one of my favorite holidays, and I presume one of the favorite holidays of all of the creatures of the night listening to our show right now.
And if it's not, then we will accept you. You are allowed to be different.
That's right.
We do not condemn, but we may question.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. What are we watching today, Ben?
Today, Sarah, we are watching the third Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe adaptation. It's The Premature Burial from 1962.
Great. Last episode, I was like, ugh, Ray Milland in this one. We want Vincent Price. And then a longtime listener who follows us on Blue Sky commented, poor Ray Milland.
I also was somewhat shocked by your
anti-Ray Milland
attitude. Yeah. I mean, I understand that it was in the context of like, I would rather have Vincent Price in one of these movies, but like, there's nothing wrong with Ray Milland.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I don't mean anything against him. Yeah. Sorry to this man.
Well, it's okay. He's been dead for some time.
I mean, hopefully he wasn't prematurely buried.
Yeah. Excellent segue to talking about the basis for this movie, Sarah.
It comes from a short story published by our boy, Edgar Allan Poe. So I've talked about Edgar Allan Poe quite frequently. I won't go into all of the details of his life, but I will kind of position where this short story comes in to his oeuvre. His short story, The Premature Burial, was published in 1844 in the Philadelphia Dollar newspaper. I think it's a newspaper that probably costs $1.
Which in 1844 means it was probably like a really high-end newspaper.
But this is in the period of time that Poe is really leaning into doing literary journals. He's trying to start a couple of his own. This one is not one that he started, but he will start and fail and start more and fail more later on in his life. But in this time frame, he is living in Philadelphia. He had married his 13-year-old cousin, Eliza, in 1836. And while Poe struggled with alcoholism kind of throughout his life, it really intensified after Eliza was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the first signs of which were seen in 1842. He publishes this story in 1844, and Poe doesn't really get, like, he's a name in the literary circles because he's doing critiques. He's also doing his own writing, but his like big shot to fame comes with The Raven, which is in 1845.
Gotcha.
So a year after this short story is published, and the short story is also 3 years before Eliza dies, and things really go down into the toilet for him. So we're still in the like, okay, you know, struggling. Eliza's doing okay, but she's never fully recovered, trying to make it work.
Got it.
The short story, as usual with Poe, has an unnamed narrator. And this narrator explains in the short story that they have catalepsy. So basically that catatonic state and almost like seizures that lead to being completely rigid. As a result of this diagnosis, the narrator has a phobia of being buried alive.
Right.
Now, that is a fear that is understandable in this time period, but for the narrator, it is an intense phobia to the point where they refuse to even like travel outside of their home in the event that someone who is unfamiliar with their medical diagnosis stumbles upon them.
Sure.
If they travel with friends, they make promises with their friends like, hey, you will check all of these things, like a full checklist before you presume that I am dead, because I do not want to be buried alive. That is the absolute worst thing that could ever happen to someone. The narrator has even gone so far as to build their own tomb on their property that has all of these like elaborate mechanisms and alarms so that if they were buried alive and they were trapped inside the tomb, they would have a way to be like, hey, I'm still here.
Right. Wasn't there like a thing for a while where coffins would have like little bell strings attached to them for this reason?
Yeah, I'll get there in a second.
Okay.
So the climax of the short story comes when the narrator wakes up in a dark, confined space. And they start freaking out because they're like, oh, the precautions I took, they were for naught. I can't believe that this has still happened to me. And so they start to scream, and then someone hushes them. And they realize that they are actually in like the berth of a ship, a small boat. They've not actually been buried alive. They just woke up suddenly and kind of panicked. But this experience shocks them out of their phobia of being buried alive, because they're like, actually, you know what? Like, I got through it. Interestingly, this leads to their catalepsy stopping altogether.
Interesting.
The short story, it was published in 1844. It was republished in a few different publications the following year, including one that Poe was editor of. So it's not a case of plagiarism that he fought with a lot. And you can see the theme of being buried alive in a few other Poe works, either very deliberately, like with Cask of Amontillado.
Sure.
Or, you know, it being a flavor part, like a little bit with the House of Usher because of the sister being buried alive.
Right.
So the fear of being buried alive is called taphophobia. And it's a fear that you can see all the way back to like the 14th century. And it kind of makes sense because for folks who don't have a lot of medical knowledge or technology around them to be able to check if someone is legitimately dead, the only way that you could really confirm that someone is dead is, you know, raise the arm. Does it fall back down? Yeah, I guess they're dead.
Right.
They would have other ways of like holding a mirror underneath your nose. But if you're in such a deep sleep or you're breathing very shallowly, that stuff isn't always reliable, right?
And you have to know to do those things too.
That too. And I think also in periods of history where we see pandemics like the bubonic plague,
right,
there are large numbers of people dying. Medical personnel is stretched thin. So you see someone unconscious, you're like, well, another one bites the dust, toss them into the wagon.
Bring out your dead.
You can see this social fear being addressed both with like art and culture, but also with like patents coming into being. In the early 1800s, out of Germany alone, there were over 30 safety coffins designs patented. These are coffins that have some kind of alarms or a system where you would be able to get fresh air, like a clockwork fan would kick in if it noticed that you were moving. Bells were quite frequent as like the easiest thing because it's just a string in a tube, rather than some of these have like, hydraulic bellows almost to keep the air moving. One design has like these bellows for air and then a ladder so you could like get up, but then also the bell so you could ring for help in case you're too weak to climb the ladder. So there are...
One of them has an iPad in it for you to pass the time.
There are like even coffin patents today, like coming out in this century even, that tie in a feeling of like, oh, I want to be able to listen to my music while I'm dead. Silly things like that. Or like, I want to be able to FaceTime my grandmother. Like, no, thank you. This is a little much, guys. But we see these patents coming in, but there are also like newspaper accounts of people having been buried alive and being found and taken out. In some cases, they would be so weak that they would die shortly after, but it is documented that this was a thing happening. It wasn't just like hysteria over a fear that didn't actually happen. So frequently with like the early 1800s and even like late 1700s, like when George Washington died, apparently, he was like, you can't bury me for 3 days. So that way, you know that I'm actually dead. That was a pretty common practice of like, wait for someone to show that they are rotting or something like that. People watching over a dead body before they bury it. And that's actually where the tradition of like a wake, some families have a wake before they have the actual funeral. And it has ties to, you know, we're not burying Bob yet. What are we going to do with Bob's body? Well, I guess this will have an opportunity for us to come up by and see if he wakes up.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. So a legitimate, though it is like unlikely that this would happen. It was few and far between, but it is a legitimate fear people had.
Right. I feel like this has a similar problem to most of Poe's short stories in terms of adapting them to a film, where it's like there is one scene in this story and it takes place entirely in the narrator's mind and nothing happens in it.
Yeah, a lot of the short story is spent with the narrator trying to explain why they have this fear.
Right.
Like being like, oh, there are these reports. They're like rationally explaining to you.
Yeah. And then it's like, now I'm in the dark in a confined space, so I'm pretty sure I've been buried alive and I'm scared of it. And then someone's like, oi, Bob, you're in a ship. And it's like, oh, okay, never mind. Like, that's the whole story, right? Like, it's something where I could see it being very effective in prose, like going into this guy's psychology and establishing mood and atmosphere, which like Poe was always really great at. But in terms of like, what do you shoot? What's the movie? What's the story? Like,
yeah, in cases where we've seen this on film so far, like we've seen parts of like Cask of Amontillado and whatever, but in terms of premature burial, accidental premature burial, I think the most striking example comes from Isle of the Dead.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very striking, but even that is just a scene in a larger horror movie.
Yeah, I think we've seen it in Crime of Dr. Crespi.
Yeah.
And I also always think of like Vampire, where he's got the little like window to look out of his coffin.
I feel like Crespi, it was like on purpose that he got buried.
Yes. Yeah.
So
it was to try and like delay him from stopping Eric von Stroheim from doing stuff.
Yeah, so it was done on purpose, not
Yes.
an accidental premature burial.
Right. So regardless of how little there is here to turn into a movie, House of Usher had made $1.45 million on a $300,000 budget. And the follow-up, Pit and the Pendulum, had made $2 million on a $300,000 budget. So clearly, Corman was onto something with these Poe adaptations. And, you know, Corman's whole artistic practice was make money on something and then keep that train going as long as you can, right?
Absolutely.
So Corman, that is Roger Corman, felt that the best Poe story after Usher and Pitt was Mask of the Red Death. But he was worried that any film he made of it would be too similar to Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal.
Yeah, well, it's the same movie. It's not. It's not.
But like he was really kind of like worried that it would be too close and suffer from comparison. So he was feeling unsure about adapting that one, and so it's like, okay, let's pick a different one. He was also feeling like he wanted to get out from under the thumbs of Samuel Z. Arkoff and James H. Nicholson, who were the heads of American International Pictures, or AIP, the group that had like funded and distributed most of the movies he had directed in his career. So Corman went to Pathé, the company that handled the print lab work for AIP. So they like did the film prints for them for distribution. And like Pathé has been at various times in its history a distributor, and you know, they had put up the money for some of AIP's films. So Corman thought, okay, I'm going to go to Pathé and convince them to support the film directly, right? And kind of sidestep AIP entirely. And so Pathé put up the money. for the movie, and Corman brought on writers Charles Beaumont and Ray Russell to take on the task of expanding the short story into a feature. So Charles Beaumont was an author of genre short fiction and is best remembered today as the writer of a number of classic Twilight Zone episodes.
Oh, nice. Okay.
He was born Charles Leroy Nutt in Chicago in 1929, and he had an abusive mother and a very unhappy childhood. He dropped out of school to fight in World War II. And after the war, he worked a number of odd jobs before selling his first story to Amazing Stories in 1950. He changed his name to Beaumont to escape the ridicule that his name had brought him all his life.
Yeah.
His story, Black Country, was the first short fiction published in Playboy in 1954. His story, The Crooked Man, for Playboy, presented a world where heterosexuality was stigmatized the way that homosexuality was at the time. Kind of a classic, I guess, allegorical bigotry is bad kind of story.
Yeah.
He was a very prolific writer, and he was greatly admired by his contemporaries. He wrote 22 episodes of The Twilight Zone. He had 5 short story collections published during his lifetime. He wrote 13 film screenplays and 2 novels.
Wow.
By 1963, he was 34 years old and very much overwhelmed by the number of writing commitments he had taken on. He kind of said yes to everything.
I can understand why you would do that.
Yeah, you're just trying to keep like the work coming in, right? There's a fear that if you say no to something, people will stop asking, right? But his mind started to go, and he could no longer think as quickly or remember things well. He had trouble speaking. And in 1964, it was concluded that his mental decay was likely Alzheimer's and probably terminal.
Wow. At 34?
Yeah, he passed away in 1967 at age 38, though his son said that he looked 95.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Towards the end, like in the years between his diagnosis and his death, a lot of his friends started writing, like ghostwriting things for him so that he would keep getting paychecks. But like he wasn't capable of doing the work, right?
Wow.
So Ray Russell, who worked with Beaumont on the script for Premature Burial, had worked at Playboy as the fiction editor, and he had been one of Beaumont's like biggest supporters. Russell was also the writer of Mr. Sardonicus for William Castle, which was based on his own short story. And when we watched that movie, we felt that the film was trying to be like one of Corman's Poe movies. So it kind of makes sense that Corman brought him on board. Cinematography here is once again by Corman's veteran DOP Floyd Crosby, and the rest of the crew were also Corman regulars like editor Ronald Sinclair and composer Ronald Stein. Corman wanted Vincent Price again for the lead, but Price was under contract with AIP, and they blocked his casting. Which kind of makes sense in a sort of like petty business way, like, oh, you're trying to do one of these without us? No, we're not going to loan you Vincent Price to star in it, right? So Corman got Ray Milland. Now, the last time we saw Ray Milland for the podcast, it was in 1944 for The Uninvited.
Wow, so like 8 years? Wait, 40, we're in 60, so like 28 years?
Yeah, 1944 to 1962 is 18 years.
Okay. I got the 8.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
Math is not my strong suit. I apologize.
Shortly after The Uninvited, in 1945, he played the lead role in The Lost Weekend, a harrowing portrait of alcoholism that won Ray Milland the Academy Award and is considered one of the best acting performances of all time.
Wow.
It was like a huge challenge for Milland because up to that point in his career, he had really kind of coasted on being like a pretty boy romantic leading man, where it was all about like his looks and his charm. And that was kind of about it. The Uninvited was kind of an unusual part for him at the time, as we talked about when we covered that movie. He really didn't understand why he had been cast for Lost Weekend. He wasn't an alcoholic in real life. He barely drank. He didn't understand alcoholism. The first like week or so of shooting, he was like, I'm doing a terrible job. So he ended up like, because he tried like, oh, maybe I'll play the part drunk and that'll be authentic. And it didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So he ended up like spending time at, like they wouldn't have called them this in the 1940s, but like detox centers, like hanging out with patients who were struggling from withdrawals and like studying them and like doing all this work. And he put like a ton of work into that role. And it was kind of the first time he'd ever put like effort into his acting, really. And he ended up winning the Oscar for it. And it's still considered like a bravura performance to this day. It led to him becoming like a top paid star. Like he could really just like command top salaries. He continued to star in like top 8 pictures through the 1950s, including one of my favorites, which is 1954's Dial M for Murder.
Yeah.
In the late 50s, he found himself kind of growing bored of acting. He was kind of on the record as saying like he didn't really like acting. It was just the only thing he knew how to do to make money.
That's a mood.
he had kind of like, been picked out because of his good looks and charm. It was like, hey, you should be an actor. And then he did all these romantic roles. And then he did Lost Weekend, and it was suddenly like, oh, you're an actor now. And he felt like a much greater responsibility to like really put effort in. But it wasn't like, he was feeling very bored, as I said, by the late 1950s. So he turned to directing. And he started directing films and directing TV episodes, but he retired from acting in 1958. And then he came back, and then he retired again in 1960, and then he came back. Because when he wasn't acting, he was super bored. Like he would hang out on his yacht and he'd be like, what am I doing? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't, like, there's nothing to fill my days. His wife was really annoyed having him around the house all the time. So he came back to acting, but what sort of his strategy became was to transition away from leading roles into character acting and TV roles. And so Premature Burial kind of represents one of the last like lead roles he ever played before making that transition to character acting. And, he continued appearing in movies and TV through the 70s and 80s until he passed away in 1986, I believe. And, he was asked like, what's the secret to your longevity that you're still appearing in stuff in the 70s and 80s and whatnot, when like a lot of your contemporaries who were leading men in the 40s like are no longer appearing in stuff? And he said, well, basically, I had to get realistic. Like, I have all these buddies from my generation who are like, oh, they never send me scripts anymore. And it's like, yeah, because you keep turning down everything that's not a lead role. You're not 28 anymore. You're 68. Like, get a grip, basically. And so this transition to character acting was really what helped him keep his career going. So this is kind of like his last big leading man part.
I feel like this is a nice transition into that character acting, though, because horror allows you to be not just leading man.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 2 female leads in this picture. Ray Milland's sister in this movie is played by Heather Angel, an English actress who was born in 1909, so she's 2 years younger than Milland. She'd been acting on stage since 1926. Her first film appearance was in 1931. She was in a few English movies. Then she moved to Hollywood in 1932. Her Broadway debut was in 1937. She had a regular role in the Bulldog Drummond series of like adventure thrillers in the late 1930s. She appeared in a few Hitchcock pictures like Suspicion and Lifeboat, but her career largely waned after she married her second husband in 1944. At the time of appearing in this film, she had not been in a movie since 1953, when she had voiced Wendy's mother in Disney's Peter Pan.
Okay.
In 1970, her husband was killed by a burglar, and she herself passed away from cancer in 1986.
Okay. So do you know why she came back for this picture?
I don't really. It's kind of like a weird outlier. She started acting again a little bit after this. She was on the TV show Peyton Place for a year or so after this. So I wonder if it was just like from 44 to 62, like maybe the kids were grown up and it was like, okay, let's like try doing stuff again, maybe. I don't know. The other female lead is Ray Milland's wife, played by Hazel Court, who we know. She's 19 years younger than Ray Milland. And we first saw her as Elizabeth in Hammer's Curse of Frankenstein. And the last time we saw her, she was the nurse in Dr. Blood's Coffin. Mm-hmm. She had moved to the U.S. by this point, and she's going to appear in a few of these Corman Poe movies in the future.
I feel like that makes sense, especially she has an English accent, so, you know, it kind of fits the period thing that he goes for.
Yeah. The rest of the cast features some familiar faces like Alan Napier and Corman regular Dick Miller.
Hell yeah, Dick Miller.
So on the first day of shooting the Premature Burial, Corman received a nasty surprise. AIP bosses Arkoff and Nicholson were there on set waiting for him. And they revealed to Corman that they would be working together again because Premature Burial was going to be an AIP film after all, because AIP was going to be distributing the picture for Pathé because they had gotten the distribution rights from Pathé in exchange for not pulling all of their film lab business from Pathé.
Wow. Real dick moves over there.
Very petty energy. Like, very like, oh, you think you're going to do this without us? We will bury this company if you
prematurely
if this doesn't happen. Yeah, so Pathé was like, oh shit, you're like a third of our film lab work. Yeah, absolutely, you guys can do the distribution for this for sure. So it wasn't funded by AIP, it wasn't made by AIP technically, but they got the distribution rights out of it.
What does that mean for like what money they would get?
AIP gets the box office for the movie, right? They would have purchased, normally you would purchase the rights from Pathé, but they kind of just like blackmailed the rights out of Pathé. Yeah. So AIP kind of gets all the money here, basically. Okay. So Premature Burial was released on March 7th, 1962. It was another hit. It grossed $1.4 million, so a little less than the first two Poe movies, but not like a huge amount less, like not failure territory, still a hit. But the critical reaction wasn't as good as the earlier titles. Critics praised the visuals, the atmosphere, and the music, but they found the story very predictable. They thought that kind of the formula was getting stale, and it was felt that Ray Milland was good, but he was not as well suited to the material as Vincent Price would have been.
Yeah, these are all very fair things.
Critics worried that with this third installment, AIP might be, quote, running a good thing into the ground.
And then Corman went to make many more Poe films.
Yeah, I think there's like 5 of them still after this.
Never gonna stop. Can't stop, won't stop. Well, how are we watching this movie?
So Premature Burial is available on Blu-ray from Kino Lorber, and you can watch it online on Amazon Prime.
Okay. Well, folks, hopefully you can find this movie and it hasn't been locked away
prematurely.
You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when we come back, we will discuss the Premature Burial. Do you think it's burial or like burial?
I think that's just a like accent pronunciation difference. I don't think that's like a significant, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I say burial.
Yeah. I once heard someone say buried instead of buried, and I became obsessed with saying buried after.
Right.
It's like when you say like a berry, like a strawberry.
Right.
But saying strawberry.
But like I think, yeah, sure. I think it's just an accent difference. Like burial, buried.
Yeah.
Burial, buried. Anyways.
This is from Roger Corman from 1962, and we will discuss it once we come back from the break.
See you on the other side, everybody. Welcome back to Scream Scene, everybody. We just finished watching The Premature Burial from 1962, directed by Roger Corman, starring Ray Milland. Sarah, what did you think?
I thought it was pretty good. I feel like there's a level of like good that you can expect when Corman is working with these same folks over and over again. And I don't want to seem like I don't like Ray Milland. Like he seems like a fine guy. Ben shared, his work on Long Weekend and
Lost Weekend, I think it's called.
The Lost Weekend.
Yeah.
Sorry. In any case, like I respect him, like cool, whatever. He doesn't quite fit this, but I don't think it would have been the right choice to have Vincent Price in here either.
Interesting.
But we can talk a bit more about that later. What did you think?
This movie feels very middle of the road to me. Like you said, I think there's a certain base level competence. They've really figured out like a formula here, and this is the third time they're doing it. And you can tell that Corman's like very comfortable with what he's doing here. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with this movie, but nothing in it was really special to me either.
Yeah, and I think that's because it's basically a more focused Pit and the Pendulum.
Right, and Pit and the Pendulum was itself another House of Usher. Like the way that they've figured out how to expand these like one scene Poe short stories is to basically turn them all into Houses of Usher, which is like why I said they have like a formula now. Like there's a creepy castle and there's a family curse and there's secrets being kept and there's someone has a descent into madness and there's a surrealistic dream sequence at one point.
And like, that's dope. I love that shit. But yeah, it's like, come on, we can change things up.
Mm-hmm.
You got the confidence, Corman. Well, why don't I give the plot synopsis?
For sure.
So, as usual, we are set in Victorian times. What I particularly love is the original short story has an unnamed narrator. So our main character's name is Guy. He's just some guy. Guy Carell, he is in like the opening sequence. He is at the graveyard with his future father-in-law, Dr. Galt. Now, Dr. Galt, he's a medical doctor, and with him is his apprentice, Dr. Miles Archer. And they are all here as they exhume a body, presumably because of that whole we need dead bodies to do medical research on.
Yeah, that's more or less stated. Like this is a Burke and Hare operation, as it were.
Yeah. We see the two diggers. They have names like Mole and Sweeney, and they are whistling a tune as they work. And Guy experiences quite the shock when they realize that this man that they are exhuming was buried alive. He's dead now, but he was buried alive.
Mm-hmm.
We learn that Guy has actually had a fear of being buried alive ever since his father died, presumably many decades ago, because this happened when Guy was 13, and he swears that he would hear his father crying for help from the family crypt below the castle.
But no one else did.
No one else did, and Guy's sister, Katie, also says that, like, no, that's not what happened. Like, this was a bad dream. Like, that's not the truth. Their father had catalepsy, and so Guy is concerned that this is now going to happen to him, and this experience at the graveyard really hits home for him, to the point where he writes a letter to his fiancée, Emily, to break off their relationship. She comes to him. She's like, please let me help you. And he agrees. Okay, we'll get married. You don't hate me after learning about this curse, about like the curse of catalepsy. These things like, okay, cool, we'll get married. But Katie clearly doesn't really like Emily. So they have a wedding. And as part of the reception, Emily plays a piano and she is playing this like merry song, and suddenly Guy's demeanor changes completely. They determine that it's because the song that Mary was playing is the same song that the diggers had been whistling at the graveyard earlier. They amazingly get married during a thunderstorm. Like, fantastic. This movie does a really good job of handling atmosphere. Because of the lightning going on outside, Guy hears a scream. He goes out, and Katie has found the family dog, presumably dead from the lightning strike. So he's like, okay, well, I guess we have to bury the dog. And then the dog gets up, presumably just stunned after being hit by lightning. And Guy's like, I was going to bury him alive. So this moment kind of sparks him going, okay, that's it. I'm not risking this anymore. I'm building myself a tomb, and it's going to have all of these unique contraptions that are going to be a means for me to get out and escape. And if, plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G fail for how to get out of this tomb, if I am buried alive, there is poison here. So I can at least end it all. This is a step too far. So Emily enlists the help of Dr. Miles Archer, who is her father's apprentice. And Miles confirms that, yeah, it's probably that grave experience that has brought on this phobia, but also that Guy has instilled in himself catalepsy. It's not a hereditary disease, but he is making it so due to his own phobias.
Yeah, Guy is convinced that he has catalepsy and that puts him at risk for this, but he's never actually had an attack. It's never actually happened. He is imagined himself into this.
Yeah. And Miles believes that Guy really needs to just rest and recover and have no reminders of death, of funerals, of being buried alive, of any of those macabre subjects, so he can fully move past this shock and experience. So Emily goes to take Guy for a walk on the moors, and he begins to hear a distant whistle from the diggers. And he runs off, and it gets louder, and eventually he sees the diggers, and that causes him to faint and experience this surreal nightmare where it's the worst case scenario. He's been entombed alive, and every piece of the tomb is not working, including the poison. Emily didn't see the diggers, so it seems to all be in his head. And there are other things that are going on where it's no one else heard the whistling. No one else heard or saw the diggers. He also experiences these the whistling and these apparitions in his own house. Miles suggests to Emily that she basically give Guy an ultimatum. So she goes to Guy and says, look, you're not living. You are refusing to leave the tomb because you want to keep working on it. But I don't want to be in this relationship. So either you come out of the tomb, we get rid of it, and we live together, or I'm leaving you and you can be in this tomb as long as you want.
She very aptly points out that if he's spending all of his time in the tomb, if you're afraid of being buried alive, you have already done it to yourself because you're spending all your time in the tomb anyway.
Yeah. So Guy comes to his senses and he's like, no, I choose you, Emily. They blow up the tomb and it seems like Guy is going to be okay. But we see a little bit of a mysterious figure lurking around the castle and around Guy's father's crypt in particular. Guy and Emily are planning on going on their long-delayed honeymoon, but they are having a farewell party before they leave. And during this party, where it's, Guy, Emily, Emily's father, Dr. Miles Archer, and Katie, they hear a cat being in the wall.
I just realized something.
What?
Miles Archer is the name of Sam Spade's partner in The Maltese Falcon, who gets killed at the start of the story.
Okay.
Sorry, it was just you kept saying both the first name and last name together, which made me go I know that name. And now I'm yeah, it's from Maltese Falcon. Anyway, sorry, go on.
So they find this cat and this really spooks Guy. He's it was in the wall, alive. It was buried alive. And he starts to spiral again. And Miles suggests, all of this seems to be linked back to that original experience when you were 13 and believing that your father was buried alive. So why don't we go to the crypt and you can see firsthand that that is not the case. So they all go down, they open up the crypt, and a skeleton falls out. Guy faints, and they believe that he has actually died from a heart attack. But what has actually happened is he has gone into that catatonic, cataleptic state. And so he's conscious. We can hear through voiceover what his thoughts are, but everyone seems to believe that he is dead. They do some other tests on him, and no, he's dead. Emily had made a promise to Guy that he would not be entombed in the family crypt, so they go to bury him in the graveyard. And he gets fully buried alive. That night, Dr. Galt gets those two same diggers. They got good business here. He gets those two diggers to exhume the body because he wants to do some science research on this about what was causing this madness. As they dig out the coffin, a traumatized Guy gets up and he kills the diggers. And then he goes to Dr. Galt and kills him through electrification, which is wild. And then he makes it to Emily's room. Now, we had just seen Emily talking with Miles and saying, Miles, I think I made a mistake marrying Guy, and it's great that now I have money, but, we were sweethearts once. Perhaps we could try again. And Miles is like, your husband was just buried today.
Yeah, it's an interesting scene because the idea that they kind of have feelings for each other has been pretty effectively laid subtext up to this point. From the first time we see Miles at the wedding, he kind of has that ex-boyfriend vibe to him. And, and she's like, oh, I've had such a horrible last few months. I just need someone to comfort me and some kind of good times, and stuff. And he's like, this feels a little weird. And walks out on her. It's a pretty good scene, actually.
I think so. So he leaves because the servant has found Dr. Galt, and the servant is like, hey, Dr. Archer, you need to come see this. So he leaves the room. And then that's when Guy enters and confronts Emily. She is freaking out and faints. So Guy picks her up and he takes her to the graveyard to bury her alive.
Classic, woman in a white nightgown being carried through the smoky moors by the ostensible villain.
Mm-hmm. So he starts burying her alive. She's screaming, and Miles realizes what has happened and follows and heads to the graveyard. He starts to fight with Guy, and in the midst of that fight, Guy gets shot by Katie off screen. It pans over and we see her holding the gun. It's quite a good moment. I think it's a good scene. Miles checks and Emily has died, and Katie explains.
Yeah, to be fair, Guy was burying her alive by just tossing the dirt directly on her.
Yeah.
She wasn't in a box running out of air. She was just getting dirt heaped on her directly.
Yeah. So she's dead, and Katie says, I knew she was up to something, and they check, and Emily has the key to the father's crypt with her that shows that she set up that skeleton to fall and has kind of organized all of this to happen. And Katie just couldn't confront her until she actually had evidence. But this is how it ends. Miles and Katie are the lone survivors. Where would you like to start? I feel like, as we kind of said at the beginning, the music, the cinematography, all of that comes together. We know they're good at what they do. And they, again, prove that this movie, they make it look great and sound great.
Yeah, I think this movie has good atmosphere, great music, lots of cool camera movement. I think Corman has become very adept at making these movies, and he's really getting comfortable and coming into his own with these larger budgets. And from a technical standpoint, I think this movie is very well made. I think it has some, I don't know if flaws is the right word, but I will say the movie's swerve got me.
Yeah, the movie does a pretty good job of setting up Katie to be the person who you suspect.
Yeah.
in such a way that I was like, okay, it can't be Katie. She has to be a red herring. But I had no clue what was going on. And so I thought maybe it was Dr. Galt when we see him when they're talking about, like when the diggers are talking about that, odd that he didn't wait at all to exhume his son-in-law's body.
Yeah.
But it's clear like, no, it was just like a scientific pursuit.
I legitimately thought it was Katie.
Yeah.
I thought that just like, that the clues were obvious to me because I'm well versed in these kinds of movies where I was like, oh, I can tell. Because there's not like, you don't see Katie like sneaking around being like, meh, heh, heh. It's just kind of like every time something gets said, like she's the first one there to kind of put doubt in people's minds. She's there with the dog. She's kind of like the one who immediately when Emily arrives, she's trying to stop Emily from seeing Guy. She's been giving Guy laudanum, like right away, there's just all these little things that make you go like, okay, she's the one who's driving him crazy, probably to like get the inheritance or something, right? We've seen this like a million times. I didn't suspect Emily at all to the point where when Guy's burying her, he's like, aha, I knew it was you. And she's like, no, Guy, no, like it was Katie. It wasn't me. And then he buries her alive. And I wasn't sure if like maybe it was Katie and this is like supposed to be part of the tragedy of the ending is that he's gone like totally off the rails.
Yeah.
And then Katie shows up and shoots him. And I was like, aha, see, it was Katie. But then like, she's like, no, actually, I was the good one all along. And looking back, like it makes sense. It's like, oh, Katie was trying to prevent Emily from getting in because she was trying to protect Guy from Emily. And like the reason Emily came was like Guy was going to cancel their engagement, which would have cut her off from the money and like this kind of thing. And like, okay, like this was all sort of her trying to get the money she never had while still ending up with like the guy she had the hots for when they were younger.
Yeah, we get like through the movie as Miles is trying to help take care of Guy. Some comments about how they had been sweethearts earlier. He was like a penniless wannabe doctor. She had greater aspirations to be a lady.
Yeah, so this was like a way for her to get everything she wanted. But I think that there's a bit of a weakness here in that I feel bad for Hazel Court, who plays Emily, because she never really gets to play the interesting part of her role. Like the closest she gets is that scene where she tries to kind of like put the moves on Miles and like, get some that night. But even that scene, like I think if you didn't know the twist, reads like you can just easily read it as like, yeah, she's had a horrible time. She wants kind of someone to love. He's there and she used to be in love with him. Like she's just kind of making a bad decision in the moment or whatever. Like,
yeah,
questionable if it's a bad decision. Her husband is dead, even if they just buried him earlier today. So like, that's the only scene though where she kind of gets to do a little something different. Otherwise, she's very much consistent the whole movie into this kind of like innocent, worried, put upon wife routine.
Yeah, I feel like the story stays very focused on Guy's psychology and Emily being the worried wife. So for me, like I feel like the twist of her actions kind of comes out of nowhere. Looking back, as you said, like it's plausible.
Yeah.
It's not like a total 180. But honestly, like you're pointing it out that there might be a weakness here. For me, I feel like it's a real missed opportunity to really like add some meat or juice here.
Because she never admits it even when he's killing her.
Yeah.
Like as he's tossing the dirt on her, she's still like, no, Guy, no. Like, what are you doing? Like, I loved you. Like, what is blah, 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 blah. It's Katie, not me, blah, blah, blah. So like Hazel Court never actually gets to play the villain that the story is making her out to be. Katie shoots Guy. And so all of the emotions of like understanding what's happening is all retroactive.
Yeah.
And getting explained to us, right?
And they do at least that explanation pretty like seamless and quick. Mm-hmm. It doesn't like stop the movie and be like, let me explain to you what happened.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a weakness there in like never actually getting to see Hazel Court get to sort of express the betrayal. As for Ray Milland, I think he's fine. He does a good job. He's not a bad actor. He's fine throughout the movie. I think if there's a problem with Ray Milland, and this is something that like comes across when you watch like Dial M for Murder and a lot of his other roles, is that he has this bearing about him in the way that he delivers lines and things where he comes across extremely reasonable.
Yeah.
So like there's this scene where he's showing them the tomb he's built, right? And it's like, yeah, so if you're in the coffin, like you do this and it quick releases and you can get out. But then the doors are locked. So what do you do then? Well, you pull this thing and it auto opens the doors. But what if the gate gets stuck? Well, you pull this thing and like the ceiling opens up and a rope ladder comes down. Well, what if that breaks? Well, over here, there's tools to fix everything. Well, what if the tools break? Well, over here, there's like books and food and water so you can like hang out till someone rescues you. And like he's showing all these things, and it's supposed to kind of come across like the way it's coming across to Miles and Emily is like, oh, you've gone down like a weird rabbit hole, and this is like an extreme sign of you're crazy. But like the way that Ray Milland delivers the dialogue, it's like, these are all very well thought out, reasonable safety precautions. Like this guy is worried about being buried alive. Ergo, it's a totally reasonable thing to do to put in some safeguards into his tomb.
Like, yes, but like, I'm not going to disagree with you that like, I think his delivery is very like, I am a reasonable person.
Yeah.
But I do want to add in that you and I both experience hyper focuses and ruminations and like covering something and at every angle and have, it might not be a tomb and how to escape from one, but we have gone into that kind of obsession. So I wonder if like maybe that would feel less like a reasonable person's explanation to a neurotypical.
Well, okay, listen. One, victory is in the preparation.
Exactly. I kept thinking about Batman. I was like, this
right?
dude.
Yeah. Two, what I'm trying to say, though, is that I don't think it's the actions, it's the line delivery.
Yeah.
Like if it was Vincent Price being like, and here's the next thing in the tomb, because if I begin to die, like over here, I have this thing, that's one thing. But it's Ray Milland. So he's like, and you see over here, there's a very intelligent, like it's so calm. And it's not even crazy calm. It's just kind of like, yeah, and like, here's your in-flight magazine and like whatever. He gets to be a little more manic after he comes out of the tomb and they sort of give him some crazy person makeup and he gets to be like, like murdering people and whatever. But like,
he was great with that.
But like, yeah, I think you can see the loss of someone like Price who could have like played the mania a bit more because like, yes, it's not right that he's spending all of his time worrying about this tomb instead of going on his honeymoon with Emily. And you can see why Emily is concerned. And like, yeah, he's not cataleptic. It's all in his head. That's a problem. But I feel like if the whole thing Emily was doing was like, oh, I've got this elaborate plan to drive him crazy, we should have kind of felt him becoming crazier over time. And instead, like, he's just a guy with a specific phobia that keeps getting triggered over and over again. And when he goes into distress, everyone around him is like, you're crazy.
Yeah. Like, I kept thinking about the ways that you are supposed to like interrupt ruminations and like help someone overcome a phobia. And it's not by saying like, stop thinking about it. You're crazy. Just don't think about it.
Right. Now,
that's not how you necessarily stop thinking about it.
To be fair, Dr. Archer does say, like in a line of dialogue, like, he doesn't say this exactly, but he basically was like, hey, it's the 19th century. We don't know jack shit about psychology. I'm sure one day people will have a better solution for this, but right now, I think this is all we got, right? So, like, there's kind of an excuse there, but like, I don't think Milland's giving a bad performance. I think it's a very reasonable performance of this person and his emotions and his thinking, but I don't think it's the right performance for the sort of rising action that this movie wants to have.
I agree. I said at the top, though, that I don't think Vincent Price would have worked either. And that's because of this movie's very similar beat and even scenes to Pit and the Pendulum.
Right. If it was Vincent Price, the fact that this is the exact same movie for the third time in a row would definitely be overwhelming to an extent that I think switching to Ray Milland actually kind of helps a little bit.
Yeah. So I feel like I think it was a good thing for Roger Corman to do to switch actors, but I don't think Ray Milland was necessarily the best choice because, as you said, you needed someone who can be a little bit more camp.
Who would you have picked? Is there anyone you can think of, like from all of our horror movie watching?
So, no, but I was going to just blurt out Oliver Reed because we just watched the Del Toro Frankenstein, and it's very good. I highly recommend. But I was joking with Ben about how obnoxious I would be if Oliver Reed ever played Frankenstein.
Yeah, for sure. The problem with Oliver Reed is that like Emily would be like, "Guy, like you can't keep doing these things," and he would be like, "I'll do whatever I please," and like smack her down, and that
Holy
would be the
shit,
end of the story.
The thing that I do like about like Emily being the bad guy is it helps lampshade the age difference.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. The 20-year sort of age gap. Yeah, I looked it up because like Alan Napier's playing Hazel Court's father, and he's the right age to be her dad. But then like he's talking to Ray Milland like, "Oh, my boy, like younger generation." And like Alan Napier's like 2-3 years older than Ray Milland or something like that. I wonder, like, this would be even a bigger age gap, I think, but like someone with like a bit of a Peter Lorre quality might have worked.
Yeah, I could see that.
Someone who gives off anxiety vibes.
Conrad Veidt. I think Dial M for Murder isn't a horror movie, it's a thriller.
Yeah.
And that very reasonable approach to his lines works really well there.
Yeah, where he's planned the perfect murder.
Exactly. And so as it starts to kind of unravel around him, there's also that feeling of like, no, but I planned this and that. And it's just like a happenstance thing that means that he gets caught. But yeah, I feel like this role doesn't quite work with that delivery.
I think the best scene in this movie is... like, other than if you really enjoy like the last like 20 minutes or so when like undead Ray Milland is like Revenant Ray Milland is on a rampage. The best scene in the movie, I think, is his like dream sequence, his nightmare about all of his worst fears coming to light, which is shot and colored and tinted very similarly to like the flashbacks in Pit and the Pendulum or the like nightmare in House of Usher, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's clearly playing the same kind of role. And I like that scene quite a bit, but you know, it's the scene that visualizes his fears for the audience. And so I think it works very well.
Yeah. Would you like to move on to ranking?
Yeah, I don't think like I have anything else to say about this movie. It's not bad. It's just like there wasn't anything about it that wowed me, even in comparison to the previous two.
Yeah. When we sat down to watch it, you made a comment that was like, you know, what you've heard of this movie is it's 80 minutes long and the last 20 minutes really make the first 60 worth sitting through.
Right.
And I do have to disagree with that kind of review that someone might give this movie. Like, I can understand why they would give it, but this movie does a lot of gothic, atmospheric tone setting and mood setting, and I think it does a really good job at doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the rising tension as Guy becomes increasingly like nervous about these fears, like, yeah, for someone who might not be as big of a fan of gothic shit as I am, like it might feel a little repetitive or anything like that. But I appreciate what they were doing here. And I think if Ray Milland had been able to be a bit more manic, it would help it not feel so repetitive. But I think that they did do a good job.
Yeah, I think the thing is that like Vincent Price in doing these movies kind of understood that the emotions in Poe stories are very heightened.
Yeah.
And you need to get a little heightened for them to read. I think Ray Milland actually does a very realistic performance here.
Yeah.
Like the way he reacts in fear to stuff and the way he freaks out about stuff is very realistic. But the problem when you apply like realism to Poe is that like the characters in Poe can't be reasonable. If they're reasonable, the stories kind of don't happen, right?
Yeah, 100%. So some waypoints before we start talking about this movie. Pit and the Pendulum is currently ranked at number 14. Fall of the House of Usher from Corman is ranked at 11.
Okay.
But I think we both feel that like Premature Burial doesn't really go up that high to Usher. Isle of the Dead, which we called out at the beginning with that buried alive scene, is at 21. And I want to also point out Taste of Fear at 22, of yet another kind of story of trying to drive someone insane.
Mm-hmm. So when I was looking at finding like somewhere to put this, my very like, well, it's not bad, but it's not good kind of vibe caused me to just go like, okay, what's the midpoint of the list? Which is number 155, Valley of the Zombies. That's much like this is
significantly worse.
Yeah. So I started like looking up from there. I spotted The Undead at 147, which is another Corman movie. And like, no, he's grown like leaps and bounds from that. And then I spotted El Fantasma del Convento in 1934, a movie that I always have a lot of fond thoughts of because I found it pretty legitimately freaky. So I established kind of that as a floor. This is definitely better than Die Nacht unter Satan, but maybe El Fantasma del Convento is better than it just because it does, that movie actually like elicits an emotional reaction from me in a way that this movie kind of didn't. Looking up from there, it's like, okay, how high do I go? At 121 and 120, I spotted Village of the Damned and Bad Seed, which are both kind of like, yeah, these movies don't have anything wrong with them, but we didn't really feel that hype about them either. A little bit above that, we have stuff like the Conrad Veidt Student of Prague, The Black Room. And then I hit 112, which is Hanyo, The Housemaid. And I think on a technical production value level, you could make an argument that Premature Burial is better. But I think Hanyo, for it, what it's doing sociologically in Korea is much more like boundary pushing. Like it's really doing some taboo stuff. It's kind of not subversive. What's the word I'm looking for? Sort of it crosses the line a little bit more, you know? And it clearly has like had a more significant effect on Korean cinema overall in that it's like still cited as one of the best Korean movies, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up deciding that on being my ceiling, which turned my range into 112 to 146.
Okay. So I had a really hard time coming up with like where I wanted to rank this because personally, I think I like Premature Burial more than Pit and the Pendulum.
Oh, okay.
Because it's more focused. It doesn't have like flashbacks of like, oh, my father was like a torturer, and it's very much more focused on like who and why we're trying to make someone go crazy. I also really appreciate how well it does some gothic stuff. So Pit and the Pendulum is ranked at 14, and I'm like, I don't know about something that like, yes, it's done well, and I think Corman's really like, you know, he's still like hitting gold, but it's kind of like your third time here. So I don't know if it really makes sense to go this high with something that like, I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's a little repetitive of like your work.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. The thing about Pit and the Pendulum, I see the argument you're making about like this being more focused. It's a little more down to earth. But because of that, I also think it never hits the highs of Pit and the Pendulum. Like when Vincent Price goes nuts in Pit and the Pendulum and like puts on the cloak and like starts pushing people into abysses and like stuff, like this movie doesn't have a Pit and the Pendulum, right? Like it doesn't have like a crazy stuff like a big scythe and all these kind of huge set pieces that movie has.
Pit and the Pendulum is also a bit more of a pastiche of Gothic and of Poe in particular. So by its nature, it will not be as focused.
Like Premature Burial, it's better than this, but it at times felt to me like TV only because it's like, this is now our third time on these like sets and doing this kind of story. And it was like, oh, okay, here's like the next installment in Roger Corman Presents, I guess.
Sure. So yeah, like I said, I was having a hard time. I mentioned Taste of Fear. I think Taste of Fear does the trying to turn someone crazy much better. And I think also structurally, it gives you an opportunity to see from the evildoer's point of view. I feel like it has a much better set up twist and red herring.
Yeah. Yeah, by the end of Twist of Fear, we were like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In like a good way.
Yes.
And of course, have to mention La Diabolique as like kind of the de facto original trying to make someone go crazy, which has its own challenges because I feel like it's more thriller than horror. Premature Burial is definitely in the horror vein, but because as I said, I was having a hard time, I put that as my ceiling. So that's at 31.
Okay.
And then I have a very large range because this section of the list, I feel like we say this of every section of the list, but it's a little messy. But going all the way down to 70, The Screaming Skull, we both really liked that movie. I really liked how gothic it was. Boy, does it have some production value challenges.
Yeah.
And
this movie looks way better.
Looks way better. Sounds way better. Like it doesn't have a weird echoey house. Like, so I feel like on that level, to me, my floor is The Screaming Skull at 70.
Okay.
Which is like 70 spots above where your ceiling was, if I'm counting correctly.
So if we look at the midpoint between my ceiling and your floor, that gets us to 91, which is another Roger Corman film. It's A Bucket of Blood.
Fuck.
Do you?
Bucket of Blood is so good and unique and original. And I'm just like, I think on that level alone, it kind of has to go above Premature Burial because of like Corman is still like experimenting. He's doing some unique things. We finally get a bit of a feature on Dick Miller. Dick Miller in Premature Burial is great, but he gets like 2 lines.
Yeah, he gets almost nothing to do. He just wears a top hat and digs the graves. Right below Bucket of Blood is Curse of the Undead, which is the vampire cowboy.
God damn.
And then we have Telltale Heart from 1960. So this is the version of Telltale Heart where he's in love with the flower shop girl across the street or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's the highest ranked Telltale Heart adaptation.
Yeah.
So in terms of like adapting Poe, I think that they did a really good job with adapting the Premature Burial short story. Like there are lines from the short story where the narrator is like, these are my fears. These are the legitimate reasons for why I have these fears and all of that. Like that gets brought in dialogue as Guy is talking to Emily and explaining why he's like this. And I think that's also why it kind of justifies Ray Milland's like reasonable approach as well.
The thing is that like the events of the Premature Burial short story don't actually happen in the movie, but that's probably fine because like that's a shitty climax for a horror movie is like, oh, actually you were scared of nothing.
Yeah, you were just in a ship.
Don't worry, it's not like this isn't a 1930s British movie where it's like, oh, sorry, the thing you were scared of was just the suggestion of the hint of a nightmare about the possibility of something maybe being a little scary somehow. Like, we don't have to do that shit. It's 1962.
The Telltale Heart on the other hand, takes a lot more liberties. It, still has that core, the heart's beating. It has, a little bit of some pastiche of like some other things coming in, but mainly it's that Poe is somehow the main character in his own story.
Yeah, that was a little weird. I did like in Telltale Heart the thing where like he digs up the body under the floorboard and like buries it in like the garden or whatever, and then like it somehow gets back into the house and stuff like that. Like and it has like the like scars of him taking the heart out of it, or like there was a lot of like cool neat little things like that.
Some really good special effects.
A couple spots below this is William Castle's The Tingler, a movie that I think I liked more than you.
Yeah, I think Premature Burial is better than The Tingler.
Okay. El Hombre y el Monstruo.
The Man and the Monster. This is one of those, I believe, Belladon. I feel like that's Mexican.
Yeah.
And just kind of doing universal homage.
This is the one where the Phantom of the Opera is a werewolf and has like Frankenstein's castle.
Amazing. That doesn't ring any bells for me, unfortunately.
This is the one where the concert pianist is a werewolf.
Oh, yeah. I feel like Premature Burial can go above that.
Okay.
So I feel like it's really a question of like how we feel about it with Telltale Heart.
I like Premature Burial. I like its craft more than Telltale Heart, but I like Telltale Heart's, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like
gumption?
Yeah, like I like Telltale Heart's like boldness better. I think Premature Burial was lacking some boldness. Like there aren't even like a lot of grisliness in Premature Burial. Like it's very kind of sedate. Like even when the skeleton falls on him, we barely see it.
It has a goofy little wig on it.
Yeah, like it's clearly they were like trying to make it look like partially decomposed, and then obviously it didn't look good because they decided not to like linger on it at all. So I'm thinking beneath Telltale Heart.
I agree.
Okay.
I think as much as we had a lot to say about their approach with Telltale Heart, I think ultimately I liked it a bit more than you did. I think Premature Burial is pretty good, but I have to also respect when people fucking do something weird, right?
Totally.
Like that's why it's going below Bucket of Blood.
Yeah. Cool. So then entering the list at the new number 94 is The Premature Burial from 1962, directed by Roger Corman.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.com. There you can find links to the other episodes that we have mentioned, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest any of these rankings or what we've ranked today, you can drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr, or you can reach out over email at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com or on Blue Sky.
Scream Scene updates every other Wednesday on SoundCloud, as well as Apple Podcasts and YouTube Podcasts and Spotify and all kinds of other podcasting platforms, which you can make sure that you never miss an episode of if you subscribe to our RSS feed. It's Halloween season. We hope that you've enjoyed this Halloween episode. We hope you have spooky, scary plans for Halloween. If Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein is playing in a theater near you, I recommend going and seeing it on the big screen.
And as part of our Halloween goodies, we have a special interview with Ben up on our Patreon, where he talks about reconstructing the original 1925 version of Phantom of the Opera as part of its 100th anniversary.
It's very, very cool. We also have from Sarah a brand new short story reading. Sarah's done this in the past with things like Carmilla and other short stories. They're always really fantastic with great production value and music. And this year it's The House of Silence by Edith Nesbit. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss out on those goodies, you can head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/screamscenepodcast, where you can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month.
Well, Ben, it's Halloween week, but Halloween will live in our hearts all year long.
That's right.
And will take us...
I was visited by 3 ghosts.
It will take us to the first episode in November. What will we be watching for that episode?
Next time, Sarah, we are going to be watching our first film from Spanish director Jess Franco, who goes on to direct so many horror movies, among many, many other kinds of movies. He was extremely prolific. We are going to be watching Gritos en la Noche, which means screams in the night. But this film is probably better known under its English title, The Awful Dr. Orloff.
More like awful title. Well, we will see you then, creatures of the night.
Bye.
Bye. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.